Genopanic was kind of an impulse buy. When it released, Steam let me know by pushing out a notification because Genopanic shares a tag with similar games I've purchased in the past. And that tag, wouldn't you know it, is Metroidvania. Shocking, right? But let me tell you, my dear viewers and listeners, don't be fooled, because Genopanic is a Mino, a Metroidvania in name only. Yes, it is a Metroidvania, but just barely enough so we can get that tag. Ugh, I should have known. The warning signs were right there in front of my face. Puzzle, platformer. Ugh, how could I be so blind? I should have known the moment I opened the map and saw all those save points. What could have distracted me from seeing the truth? Oh, hello there. Well, what was I talking about? Oh right, Genopanic. In Genopanic, you play as a nameless robot sent to a space station to pick up GMOs, genetically modified organisms. They're basically cute little animals that have been heavily experimented on. And just like any sci-fi game with a space station housing scientists who experiment on things, something goes terribly wrong, placing the entire station under quarantine. Now, it's up to some nameless robot and his cute dog AI assistant to navigate this zombie-infested space station and bring the GMOs home. And to try not to get too distracted by the space station's AI. How you doing? What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Genopanic. In all seriousness, Genopanic's a good little game, just not my cup of tea. But it could be something you dig. Only one way to find out. Let's dive in and see if there's something to salvage out of this Mino.
Combat.
I have to give it to Genopanic. For a puzzle platformer, there's a lot of combat going on here. You start out with no means of defending yourself, but soon you'll be finding all kinds of destructive weaponry, ranging from a laser sword to a laser gun to a freaking flamethrower. Honestly, if you set your game in an overrun space station and don't give the main character a flamethrower, you're doing it wrong and must turn in your game dev card at your closest internet. That kind of tomfoolery will not be tolerated. Because this is a puzzle platformer, combat's simplistic. You come up against something that wants to kill you and you kill it first by pressing the attack button. Continue pressing said button until the threat ceases to be a threat. There's no combos or dodge maneuvers or parries. Stick and move is the strategy here. You do get a whole bunch of weapons you'll need to cycle through though, so that's fun. Unfortunately, enemies largely aren't a threat, with many just kind of lying around, convulsing, or ice skating, or screaming for no apparent reason. This goes doubly for the bosses. There's only like 4 bosses in the entire game, and none are what you'd call very difficult. I think they're well made, but they're more of distractions than roadblocks. And that's it for combat. There's just not a lot to discuss here, which is to be expected considering Genopanic is a puzzle platformer. Its weapons are cool and fun to use, especially when you do apply them to the game's puzzles and platforming, which is a pretty darn good segue to the next section if I say so myself.
Abilities. Platforming.
Being a puzzle platformer, abilities and platforming is where the fun in Genopanic stems from. So, is it fun? Sure, probably. I'm just not a big puzzle platformer guy. You jump around, try not to get hurt while solving puzzles in a room so you can advance to the next room and do it over and over again until the game's beaten. There's nothing wrong with this formula, I just don't dig it. And if you want me to dig it, you gotta have a sweet gimmick. And this game's gimmick? Well, yeah, that, but also certain areas of floors and walls crumble away when you touch them, either revealing secret passages or being a trap. This is fine, I guess, but it's not a mechanic or feature I think will sell people on Genopanic, especially because the game doesn't want you to miss any of these crumbling floors or walls. Every secret passage or alternate route is telegraphed with the subtlety of an angry P. Diddy at a women's conference. And I get it, these quote-unquote secret passages aren't meant to be secrets. I'd say about 90% of these passages are vital in solving the game's puzzles, so it makes sense to want gamers to easily find them. It's just unfortunate because they're utilized so frequently, they really lose their punch within the first hour. So, what kind of puzzles are we going to be solving? There's a few hacking minigames, but mostly you'll be dealing with environmental puzzles with a lot of button pressing, elevator riding, and hazards to avoid, like enemies, flames, electricity, and lasers. Solutions are pretty easy to spot, so it's all about execution. There's some twitchy puzzles here that require some fast reflexes, and to Genopanic's credit, the game pulls this off well thanks to its responsive controls. To help with puzzle variety, the game's weapons are also used to manipulate the environment, such as the gravity gun moving boxes out of your path, and the flamethrower melting ice. Your little nameless robot also gets some traversal abilities to help with platforming and with ungating progress. And there it is, folks. Genopanic is now technically a Metroidvania, thanks to tutorial graffiti. The traversal abilities you unlock work pretty well. An air dash, hover, and double jump. Not a whole lot to say about them. If you've played a Metroidvania ever, you know what these do. That's it for abilities and platforming. Genopanic's a very short game, clocking in at a little under 4 hours in my first playthrough, so expect abilities to be thrown at you pretty rapidly, which works in its favor because it adds to puzzle variety and makes the game feel like it's moving at a quicker pace.
Progression.
Literally nothing to talk about here. There's no leveling, no gear, no stats to increase your HP, and no player expression. You get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. I'm not gonna sit here and say Metroidvanias need some kind of character progression system. There are some fine MVs out there with zero progression systems. Take the recent Animal Well. But I will say progression systems make for better Metroidvanias, and leave it at that.
Exploration.
There's almost nothing to talk about here either, which is a shame because though a good Metroidvania doesn't need a character progression system, they absolutely need good exploration. Genopanic fails in this respect and is the sole reason I call it a Mino. The game's just so god dang linear, it hurts seeing that Metroidvania tag on its Steam page. Yes, technically there's an instance, maybe 2, of backtracking in the early game, but once you get maybe 3 biomes in, it's a straight shot to the finale, which is perfectly fine for a puzzle platformer, but not for an MV. Now, there are some things you could find off the beaten path, which I thought was pretty cool, such as dead bodies and computers with messages. But these optional messages were either flavor text for world building or just straight up goofy. And that's actually it for exploration. The game's super linear, has minimal rewards for exploration, and there's absolutely zero reason to backtrack. Perhaps you can finish the game without the GMOs, and so technically collecting them could be considered a reward for exploration, but I haven't tested it, nor will I. Honestly, I don't know if this game even has multiple endings. I kinda just wanted to get it over with. Nothing wrong with the game, I was just expecting a Metroidvania. You know, because of the Metroidvania tag.
Atmosphere. Narrative.
Genopanic's atmosphere is actually very good. The sprite work is amazing, the animation is pretty great, I especially liked the main guy's running animation, and the lighting effects are top notch. Its tone is a little mixed, but that was intentional and I liked it. The game's opening does an amazing job of setting up a creepy experience. Just don't expect that creepiness to stay the entire game. The game's tongue-in-cheek sci-fi horror theme gradually gives way to just straight up goofiness, again, which I liked. I also really liked this game's music and sound design. When all said and done, presentation-wise, Genopanic is a high-quality game. As far as narrative goes, it gets the job done. I know what I'm there to do, and by the end, I know what I've done. There's nothing wrong with keeping things simple. And like I mentioned, the game's a little silly, and it leans into its silliness pretty hard with its dialogue. There's a few grammatical and localization issues here and there that led to some awkward lines, but these lines are said by the cute dog AI and very well could have been intentional. Regardless, I found these purported grammatical errors to add to the game's overall charm.
Conclusion.
Genopanic is a fine video game with great presentation, and it's a good puzzle platformer. But I'm not the puzzle platformer guru. I'm the Metroidvania guru. And as a Metroidvania, Genopanic leaves a lot to be desired. I can forgive its puzzle platformness, but I cannot forgive its linearity. Unrewarding exploration and a lack of character progression were the nails in Genopanic's Metroidvania coffin. Would I recommend Genopanic? Not to MV fans, but anyone into retro aesthetics and puzzle platformers are good to go. I also think Genopanic might be a good game for kids or people just getting into gaming. It's not very difficult, it's super short, and it does a lot of player hand-holding so nobody gets lost or stuck. But to the Metroidvania enthusiasts who consume my content, I say stay away from Genopanic if you're looking for a game to scratch that Metroidvania itch. I'm not saying all MV fans won't like what Genopanic has to offer. There's probably a couple of reasons to at least give this game a look. What was I talking about again?